Part 2. There's a particular kind of loneliness that only appears when you are not alone. It's the loneliness of standing beside someone who loves you while quietly losing sight of yourself. I didn't recognize it at first. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed time to adjust, to find my place in this new city, in this new version of my life. But time doesn't always heal. Sometimes it only reveals. The weeks blurred together. Elias left early in the mornings and came home late, carrying the fatigue of someone who was giving everything to something new. I learned to read the language of his exhaustion, the loosened tie, the way his shoulders sagged when he dropped his keys by the door, the silence that followed him into the apartment. I tried to be supportive. I cooked, I listened, I asked questions and celebrated his small victories. And slowly, quietly, I disappeared from the center of my own life. I still hadn't found work. Each rejection chipped away at me in small, precise ways. I smiled through interviews conducted in a language that never quite felt like mine. I nodded confidently while my thoughts lagged behind my words. At home, I pretended everything was fine. I didn't want to be the problem in a life that was already demanding so much. One afternoon, while Elias was at work, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes looked tired, my posture smaller, my voice, when I spoke aloud, sounded uncertain. Who was I without my routines, my independence, my sense of contribution? I had followed love across borders. I wasn't sure love knew what to do with that kind of sacrifice. The tension between us didn't arrive as an argument. It arrived as distance disguised as politeness. We began asking each other how our days were and accepting shallow answers. We stopped sharing fears, not because they were gone, but because we didn't know where to place them. One evening, I told Elias I had turned down an interview. "Why?" he asked, surprised. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just didn't see myself there." He hesitated. "Maybe seeing yourself is part of the process." I felt something tightened in my chest. "Maybe," I said, "or maybe I'm allowed to want something that feels like me." He didn't argue, but he didn't understand either. The first real fracture came on an ordinary night. We were eating dinner in silence, the kind that no longer felt comfortable. Elias checked his phone, then sighed. "I'm going to be working late for a while," he said. "There's a big project coming up." "Okay," I replied. "You don't seem happy about it." "I am," I said quickly. "I just wasn't expecting it." He put his fork down. "Anna," he said carefully, "I can't slow this down right now. This is important." "I know," I replied. "I never asked you to." "But you're thinking it," he said. "I can feel it." I looked away. The truth spilled out before I could stop it. "I gave up everything," I said, "and I don't know who I am here." His expression changed, not defensiveness, but concern. "I never asked you to give up yourself," he said softly. "But I did. For us." Silence followed, heavy and unresolved. That night, we slept back to back. Not angry, just uncertain. The next day, I didn't leave the apartment. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, thinking about the girl I had been before. Independent, careful, afraid. I had wanted to be brave. I had wanted to choose love. But I hadn't realized that choosing love also meant choosing constant change. The breaking point came unexpectedly. I received an email from my old company. They were offering me a position, better pay, more responsibility, everything I had once wanted, in my old city. My hands shook as I read it. This was a way back to myself, or a way out. I didn't tell Elias immediately. I needed to understand what the offer meant to me before turning it into something we had to carry. For 2 days, I walked the city, imagining both futures. One where I stayed, continued searching, rebuilding slowly, learning patience and compromise. One where I left, returning to familiarity, independence, control. Both involved loss. Only one involved staying with him. When I finally told him, his face went still. "That's significant," he said. "It is," I agreed. "Do you want to take it?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I want to feel like myself again." He nodded slowly. "And you don't feel like yourself here?" "I don't know who I am here," I corrected. The difference mattered. That night, we talked longer than we had in weeks, about expectations, about sacrifice, about resentment we were both afraid to name. "I'm scared that if you stay," he said quietly, "you'll blame me for everything you've lost. I'm scared that if I leave, I'll resent you for everything I gave up." Neither fear was small. In the early hours of the morning, I lay awake, listening to his breathing, and realized something devastating. Love alone could not answer this question. I needed to choose who I was becoming, with or without him. I used to believe that the hardest decisions came with certainty, that at some point the noise would quiet, the answer would rise clearly above fear, and I would simply know. But standing between two lives, both real, both possible, I learned that clarity is a luxury we rarely get. Sometimes, all you get is honesty. I didn't accept the job right away. I asked for time. My old manager replied with understanding, but I could sense the unspoken limit beneath her kindness. Opportunities, like people, don't wait forever. For days, Elias and I existed in a strange truth. We were gentle with each other, careful with words, aware that every moment carried the weight of an ending or a beginning. We cooked together, we walked together, we slept together. But something essential had shifted. We were no longer living in the present, we were rehearsing futures. One evening, we sat on the balcony, the city humming beneath us. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that threaten rain but never quite deliver it. "If you go," Elias said quietly, "I won't hate you." I swallowed. "That's not comforting," I replied. He smiled sadly. "I know. I just want you to know this isn't about blame." I nodded. "If I stay," I said, "I don't want it to be because I was afraid to leave you. And if you leave," he added, "I don't want it to be because staying felt like losing." We sat with that truth for a long time. The decision came not in a dramatic moment, but in a quiet realization. I was standing in the kitchen one morning, watching Elias tie his shoes, rushing out the door. He kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, already thinking about his day. I loved him. That had never been the question. The question was whether love could survive the version of myself I was becoming here. And I knew, deep down, that if I stayed now, I would be asking him to carry my unhappiness until it turned into resentment. I couldn't do that to him, or to myself. That evening, I told him, "I'm going to take the job," I said, my voice steady even as my hands shook. He closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "I thought you might," he said. "I don't want this to be an ending," I added quickly. "I just need to choose myself." He looked at me with a tenderness that almost broke me. "Sometimes," he said, "choosing yourself is the most loving thing you can do." We didn't decide to break up immediately. That made it harder. For a few weeks, we lived in suspension, knowing the date of my departure, but pretending time could be stretched. Every shared moment carried an ache, a heightened awareness of impermanence. We laughed more, we touched more, we memorized each other. On my last night, we lay in bed without speaking. I traced the familiar lines of his face, committing them to memory. He held me like he was afraid I would disappear before morning. "I don't regret this," he whispered into my hair, "even if it hurts." "Neither do I," I replied. That was the truth. The goodbye was quiet. No promises, no dramatic vows to stay in touch. We knew better than that. At the airport, he hugged me tightly, then let go. "Go," he said softly. "Be whole." I walked away without looking back, not because I didn't love him, but because I did. Back in my old city, life resumed its familiar shape. I moved into a new apartment, started the new job, reconnected with old friends. On the surface, everything looked like success. Inside, something ached constantly. I missed him in ways that surprised me, not just his presence, but who I had been with him, open, brave, willing to change. Love had altered me, even in absence. Months passed. I learned how to live alone again. I built routines. I felt stronger, more grounded, more myself. And yet, there were moments, quiet ones, when I wondered if becoming myself had cost me the person who had loved me most honestly. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Not an email, a letter. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was from Elias. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. It felt heavier than paper should, not because of what it contained, but because of what it represented. A door I hadn't expected to see again, standing quietly in the middle of my carefully rebuilt life. Elias's handwriting was exactly as I remembered it, precise, thoughtful, unhurried. I unfolded the letter slowly. "Anna, I don't know if this will find you at the right moment. I hope it does, not because I want anything from you, but because I want to speak honestly once more. I think about you often, not with regret, but with clarity. You were right to leave. I understand that now in ways I couldn't then. Staying would have slowly made you smaller, and loving you meant not wanting that. I stayed here. I grew into the work. The city feels less sharp now. I have learned how to be alone without feeling empty. What I want you to know is this. Loving you changed the way I understand partnership. You taught me that love isn't about holding on. It's about making space. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know that what we had was real, and that it still matters. E. By the time I finished reading, tears blurred the page. Not the kind of tears that come from loss, but the kind that come from being seen across distance and time. I pressed the letter to my chest and sat very still. For a long time, I had framed our story as something incomplete, a love that didn't make it. But reading his words, I realized how narrow that definition was. Some loves aren't meant to last forever in form, but they last forever in impact. That night, I walked through my apartment, noticing how much of myself I had reclaimed. The confidence in my voice during meetings, the ease with which I filled my time, the quiet pride I felt in my independence. None of this erased what I had shared with Elias. It coexisted. I wrote back. Not immediately, not impulsively. I waited until the words felt true rather than urgent. Elias, your letter found me exactly when it needed to. Thank you for writing it. Leaving didn't erase you from my life. It clarified it. I carry what we had with gratitude, not longing. Loving you taught me how to be brave without abandoning myself. I hope the city continues to soften for you. I hope the work fulfills you. And I hope you never doubt that what we shared was enough. not because it lasted, but because it was honest. With warmth, Anna. I mailed the letter the next morning, and for the first time since leaving, I felt complete. Life didn't suddenly transform. There was no grand reunion, no dramatic twist. There was simply continuation. Years passed. I loved again, not in the same way, not with the same lessons, but with the wisdom those lessons gave me. I learned how to enter relationships without shrinking or demanding sacrifice as proof. Sometimes love meant staying. Sometimes it meant letting go. Both could be acts of courage. Once, on a business trip, I passed through his city. I didn't tell him, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to reopen something to honor it. I stood on a bridge overlooking the river, watching the lights scatter across the water, and smiled. I had been loved well. I had loved well. The story of Elias and me didn't end in loss. It ended in truth. And that, I realized, was enough. I didn't expect closure to come quietly. After all the upheaval, the choices, the distance, I imagined that the final understanding between Elias and me would arrive in some dramatic gesture, a meeting, a confession, a single moment where everything made sense. It didn't. It came in fragments. It started with small acknowledgments in my daily life, a book that reminded me of him, a street corner where we had walked together, a song on the radio. Each time I felt a tug, not longing, not regret, but memory. The memory was warm, gentle, and unhurried. It reminded me that what we had had shaped who I was now. I realized then that love is not always about presence. Sometimes it is about transformation. Months turned into years. I became fluent in the rhythms of my city again. My work, once a source of fear and uncertainty, became a field of discovery. I made new friends, I traveled, I learned to enjoy my own company without feeling incomplete. I had built a life I could claim entirely as my own. And yet, in quiet moments, on a late evening walk, or while reading a letter I had never discarded, I remembered Elias. One day, I received a postcard. No preamble, just a small card with his handwriting on the back. Anna, I saw a bookstore today and thought of you. I hope life is treating you kindly. I carry our time together like a warm coat in winter, always with me, even if I don't wear it every day. E. I held the card in my hands and smiled, not with sadness, but with gratitude. He was a part of me still, just as I was a part of him. I thought about the choice I had made, to leave, to grow, to become myself. It had been the hardest decision of my life. It had broken me in ways I had not anticipated. It had also built me up in ways I could not have imagined. I realized that love does not always ask for sacrifice. Sometimes it asks for courage. The courage to let someone go without losing yourself. The courage to keep them in your heart without holding them back. I never saw Elias again in person, and yet I felt him in the quiet constancy of who I had become. The lessons he left me, the trust, the patience, the gentle insistence that love can exist without possession, shaped every choice I made afterward. They were subtle, almost invisible, but unmistakable. I became someone who could love fully, without fear of losing, without measuring every step. Someone who could be present, compassionate, and brave. Someone who understood that love, in its truest form, is not about holding on, but about growing together, even when apart. And in that understanding, I found peace. Love had not ended. It had changed shape. It was no longer a storm in my life, nor a desperate grasp for safety. It was quiet, steady, real. And that, I finally understood, was enough.